We're demolishing our pantry and putting our skills to the test to build the most badass storage setup while keeping our budget under $2 grand. We're doing electrical, building cabinets, doing tile work, sheetrock, and a bunch of other stuff. And the sponsor of this video is Simply Safe. There's no safe like Simply Safe, but more on them later. This is my pantry, and this is my garage. And every single day, this happens. Somebody leaves one of the doors open and we slam it, so we're gonna remove this door, we're gonna put it right here, and we're gonna completely redo the entire pantry because we also don't have a lot of food storage and we pretty much have a mess. We also have a bunch of food on the floor and we're tired of it, so let's build a new pantry. Now that we have the door off, we're gonna clean out the pantry and we're gonna break a hole into this wall right here because this is where the new door is gonna go. Ever since we moved into this house, we've always talked about how dumb of an idea it was to put just 3 shelves inside of this pantry. And it's not huge, but it could definitely use a bunch more storage racks and maybe even some cabinets with drawers, which is exactly what we plan to do, but instead of these storage racks, we're gonna build some nice floating shelves. But after removing all these stupid clips, it was time to break down the next wall so we can make a door opening. I don't know what it is, but there's something about smashing a sledgehammer through a wall that makes me feel like a freaking man. While I was ripping the sheetrock off the studs, I realized that the wall on the other side didn't only have sheetrock, it also had OSB sheathing, which is going to be much more of a pain in the ass to remove. On the outside walls, we had to be careful on how we're going to remove the sheetrock because there's nothing wrong with these walls and we want to replace the least amount possible to keep it looking nice. I used an oscillating tool to cut out the holes for the opening, then remove the sheetrock and the OSB. And my son also got a turn being Thor for a second. Nice little gusher. 4 hours later and a little cut, and we got all the walls off down to the studs. Now we're gonna add a big beam up top, some jack studs, and remove all of these beams here so we can add our door. Since this is a load-bearing wall that holds up my stairs, I wanted to add an extra support beam before removing the studs, just to make sure the house doesn't accidentally fall on us. And to cut out all the studs, I borrowed my neighbor Tom's brand new state-of-the-art Sawzall, then went ahead and cut out all the support beams, which was freaking nerve-wracking, but worked out well. I then measured the opening and cut out my 2x8s to that exact size. I put the 2x8 into place, then fastened it to the wall using 3.5-inch screws and nails. I then cut out another 2x8 and repeated the same process. To make sure these 2x8s can properly hold up the stairs, I added some jack studs under each corner. So we got all of our 2x8s up, we have all of our jack studs in and our door framed out. Now we're gonna move all the electrical switches over here, somewhere over here. So let's run all the wires. After running the wires through the studs, I hammered on these metal wire protectors just to keep them protected, because knowing me, I'll screw right into the wires when I replace the wall. I then used my oscillating tool to cut out the hole for where the switches are gonna go. Then ran all my wires into the box, connected all the switches, made sure the lights worked, then just like that, all the electrical was ran to the other side of the wall. Now that the wires are ran, it's time to remove my internet box so I can put it on the other side of the wall. This thing just takes up a bunch of unnecessary room inside of this pantry, and we really want to hang shelves in this back wall anyway, so we're moving it. I basically just went into the garage and cut out a hole that the box can fit in, then put it on the other side of the wall, rerouted the wires, and that was it. I I then had to demolish the rest of the wall, which was a complete pain in the ass, but I have to make it flat so I can hang some floating shelves on it. Then once I was done demolishing the wall, I cut a piece of sheetrock and put it into place, and that was that. I then started doing some framing so I can cover up the previous door entrance. So far in the build, we've picked up a bunch of 2x4s, some nails, some screws, and a big 2x8, which has ran us exactly 92 bucks so far. And the goal is to stay under 2,000 bucks, but we still have a lot to do, so let's see what happens throughout the build. After putting up the new framing into the doorway, I used my oscillating tool to cut out the old floor, because we're going to lay some tile here. I then had my son come over and remove the old floor and the underlayment. Then just like that, the internet box was moved into the garage and the floor was removed. It's finally time to install the rest of the sheetrock so we can move on with this project. And a little something about myself is that I hate installing freaking sheetrock, and I've recently found out that my dad also hates installing sheetrock, so I guess it runs in the family. It's just a pain in the ass to work with, and I'm gonna try my best, but don't expect perfection. I picked up some joint compound and mixed it with some water because I read online it's a lot easier to work with, then started spreading it onto the wall. I tried to make it look as nice as possible while it was wet to help reduce the amount of sanding once it dries. Cause if not, this stuff will let off a bunch of white dust and I'll be looking like I spent a bunch of time with Pablo Escobar, and we don't want that. We had to let the sheetrock dry for 24 hours before sanding it, so we decided it was a good time to install the floor. We're using this hexagon marble tile that we picked up at Lowe's, which ran us exactly $400 including the mortar and the grout, which brings the total to 492 bucks so far in this build. Which isn't too bad because we made a decent amount of money from our last video, so we figured we'd dump it right back into the channel to keep giving you guys some good quality videos. But after cutting all my tiles to size and making sure they fit properly, I went ahead and started installing them. And I'm not a professional tile expert, but I did find that using less mortar works a lot better because it doesn't seep through the cracks of the tiles, allowing all the grout to stick properly, which gives you a nice finished look. After installing the tile, I let it sit for 48 hours before walking on it, then came over and removed all the spacers so I can install the grout. I used a soft grout float and worked it into all the cracks, and worked pretty fast before it dries so I can wipe it off with a sponge. And I'll link all the tools I'm using to install these tiles in the description below. But we then used a damp sponge to wipe off all the excess grout, and just like that, all the tile floors were laid. Now that the tiled floor is done, it's time to put the OSB sheathing back on the outside wall. We used our track saw to cut it to size, then put it into place making sure it was as flush as possible before installing the sheetrock. I then went from the inside and used my oscillating tool to cut out the hole for the door. Then trimmed off the doorway with some pine 1x4s. So far we've spent $492 in this build, but after buying all the sheetrock, pine boards, screws, and compound, it brings a total to $619. After filling all the cracks and letting it sit overnight, I used my friend's electric sander to sand all the sheetrock down, which worked really well, but I then did another layer and let it sit for another day. While the sheetrock dries, let's talk about today's sponsor. SimpliSafe is a home security system that offers 24/7 professional monitoring. A few years ago, someone broke into my house and stole a bunch of stuff that caused a lot of damage and anxiety. Ever since then, protecting my house and family has been a top priority, which is why we use SimpliSafe. They offer security for your entire home, like this keypad that has a built-in panic button, motion sensors that have pet mode to distinguish between people and pets, temperature sensors that help protect against freezing pipes, and a smaller panic button that you can make more accessible. They also offer glass break sensors that are perfect for a room with a lot of windows, a larger siren, entry sensors, a key fob that also has a panic button, indoor cameras so I can spy on my dogs, outdoor cameras so I can spy on my neighbors, and even a doorbell camera. The app is super easy to use, allowing you to turn your alarm on and off, check your doors and windows, and monitor your cameras 24/7. And monitoring your home is also super affordable, costing just over $1 per day, with no long-term contracts allowing you to cancel anytime. Get 50% off of your security system, plus a free indoor camera and your first month free when you sign up for core monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/buildersblueprint to customize your package, because there's no safe like SimpliSafe. So we ordered a door online, and this whole time we thought that it was gonna come in pre-built, but it didn't. It came in pieces like this, which is freaking stupid if you ask me. So now we're gonna build it and see how it fits on the pantry door. So far in the build, we've spent $619, but this door ended up running us $550, so that brings the total to $1,169 so far. After putting the door together, I went ahead and painted the doorway before installing the door, because painting around the door hinges is a complete pain in the ass, and I want to avoid that. And I found that the best way to do this is to just screw one door hinge on, then have somebody hold the door while you screw the rest of them to the doorway. So we got the door installed. Now for the moment of truth. Yes! The door fits, and this thing's starting to look freaking fantastic. Now we're gonna paint the walls so we can install the cabinets. We decided to paint the back wall Cocoon green that we picked up at Lowe's, then the rest of the walls a lighter color, just to give this room some extra pop. I'll put all the exact paint colors in the description below. Now that the walls are painted, let's build some cabinets. Before putting our cabinet base together, we spent a couple of hours making measurements and coming up with the exact design that we wanted, then carefully cutting out the pieces and completely prepping them before screwing them together. We drilled pocket holes into all the pieces, edge banded all the exposed edges, cut out toe kicks, and sanded the crap out of them. Once all the pieces were cut and sanded, it was time to put the cabinet base together. This is the fun part. After measuring, cutting, and doing a bunch of prep work, it's almost like building adult Legos. And my son seems to think so too. I've been teaching him everything I can about construction and how to edit YouTube videos, just in case he ends up taking over the channel at some point. Or starting a channel of his own. If he does, I'll let you guys know so you can subscribe to him too. But the reason we're building our own cabinets instead of buying pre-made ones is because we need specific dimensions, and having a company custom make cabinets for us would have cost us an arm and a leg, which is why we're doing it ourselves. All the materials to build these cabinets ended up running us $306, which brings the total to $474 so far in this build. Now that the cabinet base is done, we went ahead and installed the toe kick so we can start building the drawers. I set my table saw to 10 inches and ran a bunch of pieces through it because this is going to be the depth of my drawers. I then had to cut a dado into all the pieces so I can fit a piece of 1/4 inch plywood into them, which will work as the base of the drawer. I'm not a professional cabinet builder, but I have built a decent amount of them, and I'll tell you, building cabinets is one of the most satisfying things you can do. And no, I'm not telling you to go build your own cabinets because it does take a lot of work, determination, skills, and a crap ton of tools. But what I am saying is that if you like doing DIY work and you're somewhat handy, give it a shot. You'll be surprised you can do a lot more than you think. I mean, 5 years ago, I didn't even know how to use a drill, and here I am building all types of stuff. But once I finished building all my drawers, it was time to install them into the cabinet. I stained the inside with teak oil before installing them just to keep things protected, then added spacers, installed the drawer slides and the drawers, then repeated the process over and over till all my drawers were installed. To install the drawer faces, I started from the bottom and lined up my drawer carefully, then clamped it before installing it. There's many different ways to do this, and there's also a bunch of jigs out there that can help you install your drawer faces, but I find that using a good old-fashioned piece of wood as a spacer works the best. After installing all the drawer faces, I wanted to make some shaker doors for the bottom part of the cabinet. And I'm going to keep this short and simple because this is not an in-depth tutorial on how to build a cabinet. I'm basically making a picture frame and running a dado between all the pieces so I can fit a piece of 1/4 inch plywood in between them. But if you guys want me to go more into detail on the things that I'm building, please let me know in the comments because I'm willing to go much more into detail. But the reason I speed stuff up and keep things as simple as possible is because I don't want to bore you guys half to death. We spend a lot of money and time making these videos and we really want you guys to enjoy them. Oh, and this random cat keeps coming by to hang out while we work, so we might give him a name. But after screwing the hinges onto the doors, we went ahead and installed the doors onto the cabinet. And this thing was starting to look freaking legit. The last thing to do before applying the finish was to install the hardware. And the hardware is going to be coming back off before we install the Rubio Monocoat. I just wanted to make sure everything fit nice before doing it. We also flipped this thing on its back so we can add an LED. This is a COB LED, so you won't see any of those dots, which will make everything look nice and classy. Then just like that, the cabinet was all built out, and to wrap this thing up, we wanted to add a layer of Rubio Monocoat white, which in my opinion gives furniture a nice professional finished look and the best protection you can get. I'll link them in the description below. But once the cabinet was all finished up, it was time to bring it into the pantry so we can install it. And it was a tight squeeze. Putting everything into the small pantry was like playing real life Jenga. And we're also installing these slide out drawers that we picked up at Lowe's for all of our canned food. We picked up 2 of them and stacked them on top of each other to try and maximize the amount of storage in the small space. Then slid this partition wall between the cabinet we built and the drawers. Then pulled out my stud finder so I can start screwing everything into the wall. Once everything was screwed in, I put my drawers back into the cabinet, installed the door faces, screwed all the hardware back on, and this thing was finally starting to look like a finished pantry. We originally thought this entire project was going to take no more than a week, and here we are 3 weeks later, still not finished. But after installing the hardware, it was time to install the countertop. We picked up this piece of butcher block and stained it a dark espresso color, let it sit overnight, then slid it into the pantry. Then my wife really wanted some floating shelves, so we went ahead and started to make some. And we're keeping this nice and simple. We just cut out a few pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, drilled some pocket holes into them, and glued them together. The entire thing is going to be 3 inches thick, and we're using oak plywood so we can match the cabinets. Then ironing on some edge band to cover up the exposed plywood edges, and finishing it off with some more Rubio Monocoat. To hang this thing up, we cut out some 1.5 inch slats out of the same plywood, then screwed it onto the wall. Made sure everything was nice and level, then slid the floating shelf onto the plywood pieces, and repeated the same process again so we can build another one on top of it. Now that the shelves are all finished up, I had my son seal the countertop with some butcher block sealer. I tucked the LED wire underneath the sheetrock edge and cut a notch into the baseboard before screwing it in. This will hide the wire and give everything a nice sleek look. But after finishing up the baseboards, my wife really wanted a nook built into the wall, so we started to build one. All the materials, including the paint, ended up costing us $45, and we bought a bunch of other stuff like the countertop, the stain, trim pieces, and the LED. And that ran us another $220, which brings the total to $1,729 so far in this build. For the shelves of this nook, we're using these solid oak pieces of wood that I had laying around from a previous project, which ended up being free. And we basically just cut them to size, routed the edges, sanded them, and did a light layer of Rubio Monocoat. Then brought them over to the nook and installed them. Once we finished up the nook, we went ahead and installed it into the wall, which fit like a glove. Then miter cut a bunch of trim pieces and framed it out. We plan on using it for cutting boards, which would be a great use for space, and it looks good too. But after we finished installing all the moldings, we filled all the nail holes with wood filler and prepped all the walls to get ready for paint. Now that the baseboards are finished and prepped, it's time to paint the walls. We masked everything off really well because we're going to be spraying the entire wall. I'm using an M1 Airless paint sprayer that I just picked up, and the reason I'm so excited about having a paint sprayer is because I've always used a roller, and I find myself doing some type of paint project at least once per month, so having one of these is going to be super essential for the future. And the reason I chose this paint sprayer is because it's super durable, it's cost effective, and requires no paint thinner. You can literally put the nozzle directly into the paint bucket and immediately start spraying. This thing's going to save me a bunch of time. I'll link it in the description below just in case you guys want to get one. After painting all the walls, we took off all the paper and masking tape before the paint dried. Then used some construction adhesive to glue on this transition piece. And to finish things off, we cleaned the glass with our Viper Shield product, which is our own product that we designed to help protect a bunch of different surfaces like glass, paint, stainless steel, and a bunch of other things you want to put it on. It's super hydrophobic, and here's a great example where we put a piece of tape down the middle of this glass and coated one side to show you the difference. And as you can see, the water beads up on one side, keeping the surfaces clean for longer, while the water just sticks to the other side. It also works fantastic on cars, but I'm going to link it in the description below so you guys can get one. But now that the glass is nice and clean, we did some final touches, then just like that, the entire pantry was all finished up. This entire build took us a little over 3.5 weeks to complete and cost us $2,361.